Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode in the Eyes of Truth. And my guest today doesn't need any introduction. I'm pretty sure everybody knows Scott. It's been a while, and really enjoyed having a beer with Scott at the 20th anniversary of RT, which was in the Bolshoi. It was a week ago. Time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, yeah. Or just in general, because Moscow, like every big city, it just swallows your day when you're running back and forth. It's countryside living is much quieter and peaceful. Well, Scott, we had the announcement of the Bereveshnik, the super missile that can actually just you can pop a few of them up in the air and let them sit there circling while tensions are going on as like a weapon of I guess second strike that's already deployed effectively. And we had General uh, oh what's his name? Just escaped me. He's always wrong. Former commander, U.S. Forces Europe.
Hodges.
Hodges, thank you. I was thinking Cavoli, but he's also always wrong. But
They're all always wrong.
exactly, and that'll lead into that next question after this. Hodges, the best way Hodges could describe the missile was if it's fired from Siberia, it will land in the U.S. across the poles. What's he missing?
Well, what he's missing is that he doesn't understand the concept of the missile. Um, you know, Russia doesn't need to replicate capability that already exists. Russia has intercontinental ballistic missiles that if fired, would follow the standard trajectory over the poles. That's the most expedient, efficient route. Um, and of course, that would fly directly into existing U.S. NORAD early warning radar systems, potential for interception by American ballistic missile defense, things of that nature. Those same systems are also vulnerable to an American first strike, the Trident D5 missile fired from Ohio-class submarines operating, relatively close to Russian shores on a flat trajectory, have at least the theoretical potential of carrying out a preemptive strike, a decapitation strike. It's something Russia has been worried about for some time. And you combine this first strike potential with a missile defense shield, and you see the potential of eroding Russia's strategic nuclear deterrence. It's something that Russian President Vladimir Putin has been warning people about for some time, ever since George W. Bush withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002. In 2018, Vladimir Putin, in an address, announced that Russia was pursuing new strategic nuclear weapon systems that were designed to address this very problem. How does Russia guarantee um, a retaliatory capability? Uh, Not because they want a nuclear war, but that's how you get nuclear deterrence. If the United States is hell bent to, you know, become so far forward leaning that we erode Russia's strategic nuclear deterrence, Russia has a right to respond. And there were several systems, the Sarmat system, a heavy ICBM capable of actually dealing with the what General Hodges talked about. It's not coming in over the poles. It's coming in from the south. It'll go around the world in the other direction. The Poseidon, which is a submarine launched strategic torpedo that, if detonated off the coast of an American city, would create a tidal wave of destruction. Um, the Avant-Garde, a hyper sonic maneuvering reentry vehicle that can be, mounted on several different systems. The SS-19, I think the Yars now is capable. The
Hmm.
Sarmat can carry it. There's some talk that the Oreshnik might be able to be adapted for carrying the Avant-Garde. Um, and of course, our favorite system, the one that I'm going to butcher, so I apologize to your audience, but the Burevestnik. I think I got close to that. Um, this is a nuclear powered cruise missile. Now, I have to be honest. I when if you remember a couple years ago, there was a test or something went wrong, awry in
Hmm.
the Russian north. A Burevestnik appeared to be in the water, and for whatever reason, the Russians were seeking to access it, and there was a detonation.
Yeah, yeah.
And that led to widespread speculation. There were five scientists killed. Amongst those scientists were some very specialized people from Rosatom who were involved in the development of this system. Um, and you know, everybody, including myself, was trying to speculate what could Burevestnik mean? What could it be? Um, the in the United States, we had experimented with a nuclear powered cruise missile in the
Hmm.
past. What we produced was a very dirty system. As the cruise missile flew, it just left a stream of radiation in its wake, and we dumped the design. So the question was this nuclear powered or nuclear heated? There was a lot of speculation
Hmm.
that, and I was guilty of this. I looked at some of the data coming out of the test about hypergolic liquids being in the water, um, which led me to believe that this might have been a system that was stored. The Russians had been experimenting with modular missiles that could be stored at the ocean floor as a second strike capability. Um, and in order to do that, you would need to have a heating system in place to have the system ready to come up.
Hmm.
And there's speculation, and I was guilty of this, that instead of nuclear powered, maybe they're talking about nuclear heated, nuclear batteries that would keep the system warm enough to function when needed. Because like many others, I couldn't conceive of a nuclear reactor or some sort of nuclear powered device that would be acceptable. I don't believe that the Russians produce weapons that are designed to be dirty and damaging to the environment. And, they produce nuclear weapons that hopefully will never be used.
Right. This is
But
a
if you're,
little bit damaging to the environment if they
well, I mean, if they're
did.
used, then it doesn't matter. But, you're
No
not going to
environment.
light this missile that's just going to spew radiation everywhere.
Right,
First of all,
right.
how do you- and so I had trouble conceiving this. Um, but apparently they did it. I mean, now we have a missile that flies. Well, I forget. I get my teens mixed up. Was it 14,000 kilometers in 15 hours, or was it 15,000 kilometers in 14 hours? It
Well,
was
they said it was in the air for 16 hours and it was 14,000 kilometers. So
okay. So
I don't know if it
that's
was cruising in one spot for a while, making circles uh, or distance,
but
like,
it was in the air for a
yeah,
while,
oh yeah,
et cetera. So they've done it. They've
yeah.
done something. Now, what is the benefit of this? The benefit of this is that this system doesn't have to be close to the American shores. It can be stored anywhere, in the Ural Mountains, you know, anywhere. And it's a second strike system. So if Russia gets hit, this system can be launched from anywhere. It can avoid all missile defense systems and deliver what is assessed to be a 1 megaton package to a target with precision. Um, Clearly, the United States has to consider this, and this should be the kind of weapon system that would preclude a nuclear first strike, a decapitation strike. So General Hodge is just exposing the fact that he is ignorant of what the whole concept of strategic nuclear deterrence is. He is ignorant of you know, first strike capabilities, second strike, launch on warning, all the different factors that go into, a nuclear posture. He is just yet another in a string of ignorant American infantrymen who are appointed well above their pay grade.
And if you notice, me personally, I've only known two generals, both one stars. Actually, one of them was a colonel I was serving under, and then he became a general. God rest his soul, Griffin. that were worth anything. They both started off as they were Mustangs. They both started off as enlisted and they worked their way up. It just seems like there's a uh, anti-curriculum for who's going to become the general. Not the best person that knows his job, but obvious other KPIs involved here. The anti KPIs.
Look, I was a Marine, and the Marine generals that I served with were uniformly of the highest caliber. General Al Gray was the commandant of the Marine Corps um, during the bulk of the time that I was around as a junior captain, first lieutenant, and I met him on several occasions. I hold him in the highest regard. He's a Marine's Marine, a combat Marine. You know, his record speaks for itself. I've worked with many Marine generals, and every single one of them I'd follow to the gates of hell. Um, and I've worked with some general officers of from the Army, from the Air Force, etc. I might be aging myself, but I will say this: that it appears that to get to the rank of general officer, it used to be a meritocracy. I'm not saying that there
Right.
wasn't politics involved, and clearly there is politics involved, and we've all seen the cases of generals moving their way up. But the military, U.S. military, is supposed to be apolitical. That means when you join the military, your loyalty is to the Constitution, not to any given president, any named
Hmm.
president. You know, the president of the United States, the position is the commander in chief, and therefore you must obey the lawful orders. But whether that president has a donkey next to his name or a elephant next to him just doesn't matter because they're
Right.
the president. Um, and as long as the military was apolitical in that environment, presidents didn't need to worry about who served in the military in the flag officer ranks. You wanted the best people there to give you the best advice. The Clinton administration, after the end of the Gulf
Hmm.
War, they started, I think, for the first time, at least in my adulthood, um, politicizing military ranks. They wanted to purge the military of what they called the Reagan Bush loyalists, and they wanted to instill general officers who had a political leaning that was more acceptable. Um, Again, I just point out that general officers aren't supposed to have a political leaning.
Right. Right.
Supposed to
Apolitical.
simply be about accomplishing the mission
Right.
in accordance with the Constitution and the rule of law. But now they started appointing, and so you had 8 years where you saw a purging of the ranks of um, you know conservative you know colonels and 1 and 2 star generals when they were looking for selection for the 3 and 4 star generals. And then you saw an overcorrection for 8 years under George W. Bush, where they came back and they went the other direction. And then you had 8 years of Barack Obama. Then you had 4 years of Trump. Now you have 4 years of Biden. Now you come back to Trump. The military, what has happened now is as soon as you become a lieutenant colonel, um, now to pass the board to get battalion command. I mean, it used to be all they cared about is can you lead this battalion in combat?
Right.
Can you do the job? Are you technically proficient? Or what's your leadership capacity, et cetera? But now, because battalion command is the first real step toward flag officer rank. A successful battalion commander, is in line for regimental command, and then next thing you know,
Hmm.
you got the star on your shoulders. Um, and so now the questions start being asked: what is this person's politics? How do they
Yeah.
feel
Yep.
about this? How do they feel about that? How do they feel about this? These are all the wrong questions. And this also now means that as a major, instead of, doing the stuff major, I mean, when I was in, we had a concept called the Iron Major. And the Iron Major was God. The Iron Major was the guy who, or gal, but that was the hard-nosed captain who, you know, got promoted, but probably wasn't going to go above that because they were the son of a you know what that made
Right.
all the hard decisions. They stared you in the eye. They were leaders. They just all they cared about was the profession. And every once in a while, an Iron Major made it up to Lieutenant Colonel. But Iron Majors generally tended to retire at around 20, 22 years when it became obvious that they weren't going to make Lieutenant Colonel because somewhere along the line, they pissed just too many people off. Um, and Iron Majors are what made the service because they held it together. They're like the corporal and the sergeant. You're just your badass corporal, your badass sergeant who isn't looking for the rocker, is just looking to lead Marines or looking to lead soldiers, looking to do the job the right way, get the job done, make sure that they go to war, they accomplish the mission, and people come home alive. That's what you want.
Oh
But
yeah,
now these
absolutely.
majors, they have to start playing politics because if you
Yep.
want to make lieutenant colonel, you got to start playing politics, and it means as a captain, you got to start making. You got to be careful about the papers you write.
Oh
So
yeah.
now you're at the captain's level school, and instead of writing I wrote a paper that got published in the Marine Corps Gazette, which is the professional journal of the United States Marine Corps, which criticized the Marine Corps' decision not to use large-scale amphibious operations during the Gulf War, instead allowing ourselves to become basically glorified Army divisions, two
Yeah.
divisions on launching a ground attack. Well, the Army can do that. We come in, from the sea, come in and do the things we're supposed to do. And I said, by going this route, we were making it very difficult for the Marine Corps of the future because we literally were saying we're just the Army. We wear different uniforms. Um, it was a bold paper. I mean, colonels read it, generals read it. The purpose was to generate discussion. I stepped on a lot of toes writing this paper, but
I'm sure.
it didn't matter. That's what you're supposed to do. Today, I can't imagine a captain writing a paper like that
Yeah.
because if you wrote a paper like that, you got too much attention. See, in the old days, if you were a captain, you wanted generals talking about you, at least in a good way.
Oh
You
yeah.
don't want you don't want to be that captain, but you want to be the one where they're saying, "Hey, you guys read that paper Ritter wrote? Man, that got us thinking. Okay, let's you know that's the kind of stuff you want because then when there's a problem, they go, "Hey, remember that captain that wrote that paper? Where is he? Well, he's a major now. Bring him in here." Boom, and you become the problem solver. But now captains are just playing it easy.
Oh yeah,
And so
absolutely.
we're training people from the earliest possible stages in their career to be political.
Yeah.
And in the military, you just can't be political. This is why our military today is the American military is floundering because we have a bunch of politically minded officers who are afraid to take risks, who are afraid to put it all on the line, who view being an Iron Major as the kiss of death. No, I mean, I'm sorry, the way the pyramid works, not everybody makes it to the top. And sometimes really good people don't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but
Very true.
you shouldn't be afraid to be that person. It doesn't mean that your career stalled. It means you're where you're at for a reason to do the job that needs to be done without fear of recrimination, etc. Today we just have a bunch of officers who are playing it safe, playing it
Hmm.
safe, not going to take any risks. And what you end up with then is General Hodges.
Yeah. Scott, I'll tell you, since I came in about 10 years later than you, um, I remember it didn't even start at captain's rank. It was starting at second lieutenant rank. I let out, I mean, this is how ridiculous I was getting. I let out a mustache, which was within regs. And oh, that's not professional. You can't have that. You're gonna get promoted. Like seriously, dude, calm down. I couldn't stand half the other lieutenants that were around me. I had more in common with the sergeants who were still, had their nose to the grindstone than these guys that were at second lieutenant and they were already kissing ass as a career move. I was like, jeez. And it got worse. I mean, it just got worse the further you went. At
Yeah,
late 90s, early 2000s.
and I mean, I wouldn't have survived in today's military.
Oh no, me neither.
I got oh geez, as a second lieutenant, I took a gamble writing a paper that um, rubbed some lieutenant colonels the wrong way, and I got called before a board to explain myself, and and I had misrepresented doctrine, not intentionally, just because I was a second lieutenant,
Hmm.
and I thought it was something, and they schooled me on that. you'd think that would have been the kiss of death for the career. But instead, they all said, hey, good paper, good effort, good job. Just view this as a learning
Mhm.
experience. The next time you lean forward like this, you got to do your homework. If you're going to stick your head out there, make sure you got it right.
Right.
I did a program to incorporate back then, are the Pioneer um, uh, drone UAV um, with fire support, do adjust fire emissions off it to integrate that with the batteries, all this. Um, and I designed my own Humvee and went to uh, the Defense Logistics Agency in Mojave and grabbed a bunch of radios and communications equipment that are outside of our TO&E, just signed for them straight and brought them in and built this thing, took it out there, and it worked.
Cool.
Unfortunately, I had made a phone call I think, gosh, who was building the Humvee? Was it General Dynamics that built the
Hmm.
Humvee? Um, uh, Out of Dearborn, Michigan. So whoever it was, General Motors maybe.
General Motors.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I made some phone calls and talked to engineers about how to adapt the electrical system and all this stuff. And then I took a radio that the Army had used and I took it up to McTissa, which is a facility in Southern California, and had them build a chip so it could communicate with the battalion, the battery command system. And I did all this, and it's working like a champ. And suddenly, Headquarters Marine Corps gets a bill for
Seriously.
for seven figures. And,
Whoo.
and they're like, and I signed for everything. I wasn't going behind anybody's back. They're like, who's going to authorize this? I am.
Damn,
Who are you?
seven
I'm the
figures.
Johnson officer of 5th Battalion, 11th Marines. As this, I'm God. And I'm signing away. Boom, boom, boom. And next thing I know, the message comes down to find Ritter and kill Ritter. Because Ritter had obligated the Marine Corps to a lot of money that was not budgeted properly and wasn't. My battalion commander sent me to Aerial Observer School, found a slot, made a phone call, and called me in. He said, you go home, pack your bag, go down to Coronado, California, check into to I think North Island. You're going to undergo pre-flight school training. Do not talk to anybody. Then wait there. We'll send you the orders. You're going to fly to North Carolina and you're going to go to Aerial Observer School for, I think it was 4 months and not talk to anybody. And when you come back, we'll see what happens. So they sent me to school. The general wanted to kill me. They said, well, he's in school. It would be embarrassment to pull him out and let him finish school. But by the time I
Oh.
got back, they tested the system and they went, this works. And battalion says, yeah, no, we've been testing, it works. And they're like, I mean, this is good stuff, but he can't do this. He's not allowed to do this. I came back and I stood in front of that general and I got reamed like you wouldn't believe. You'd think I mean, I should have been arrested and put in jail. Instead, I got a good fitness report, I got a medal, and my career. And the point I'm trying to make is I if I were in today's military, I'd have been kicked out a long time ago
Oh yeah.
for stuff. Instead, everywhere I went, I, I did things, I made mistakes, but they said, this is the good kind of mistake. This is how you learn. You're doing the right thing, you're leaning forward. But you can't do that in today's military.
Oh no, 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 you can't.
It'd be the end, and I saw that near the end. I remember in 1993, the Marine Corps transitioned to, it was funny, called, oh gosh, Total Quality Management,
Oh jeez.
TQM, which is an
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
IQM. And we got called in and we're talking about all the officers who just came out of Desert Storm. We won the war. We won the war because we're pretty damn good, because we had trained our asses off for years and we knew our profession and we were leaders. We were told from the very beginning, you're a leader, a leader, a leader. And then we get put in an auditorium, we're told we're managers. And we all went, no, we don't manage, we lead.
Hmm.
That's all we do is lead. And the Marine Corps said, no, you're managers now. And that was the end of the Marine Corps, as far as I'm concerned. The old Marine Corps. I'm sure the Marines today are very capable, very professional. But when your mindset from the top
Yep.
transitions from leadership, which requires risk taking, by the way, to management, which is the antithesis of risk taking. Managers avoid risks,
Yep.
mitigate
Yep.
against risks. And I saw that, and I would say that if the Marine Corps was going through that, then I imagine the other services are going through
Oh
that as
yeah.
well.
Or that went. And I'll tell you this. I mean, it all comes from the civilian side. So when I left, and then when I was doing my MBA, one of the first things that just rubbed me raw. These kids, well, most of these kids, they have no life experience. They go from undergrad straight to the MBA, which is wrong, but they do it. And these professors are telling them, look, your people are a resource. Like, no, because a resource is like your printer. You squeeze out what you can, and you throw it away and get a new printer. And you treat your people the same way. Like, well, no, no. My people are my responsibility. That's how I was taught as an officer. Oh, they didn't like that. Oh, no, 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 no. Oh, it's a resource. Everybody's just a resource, and you're just a manager of a resource. Yeah, that's society in general now.
Yeah.
It's horrible. I mean, really.
I'm I'm not, I mean, look, I'm not a businessman. Okay. And um probably for good cause because to be a successful business person has to be able to put money and profit above just about everything. And I don't do that. I spend too much time worrying about people,
Yeah.
um, and worrying about quality, and things of that nature. And as a result, my balance sheet is flatlined or in the red because I invest too much into people and into quality and not enough into making money and things of that nature. Um, that's okay because there's people who are meant to be business people and there's people who aren't meant to be business people. But the military, that's the other thing too. We got into we're heavily into the defense industry aspect
Hmm.
of it.
Hmm.
Our officers became project managers.
Yep.
And project managers are about, resource management. And that's exactly what it is. People become a resource that is managed. And again, in the military, people are not resources that are managed. People are Marines, soldiers, airmen, the most precious commodity a nation can give you, that have to be led, cared for. Um, and the one time I actually got into, management, project management was when we installed the uh, portal monitoring and inspection facility in Vodkinsk as part of the INF treaty. But the good thing about that is that mission came first. We said if we were there to try and install something that for profit,
Yeah.
no, it cost the United
Yeah.
States government a lot of money.
Yeah.
But our job was mission focused. When I left the Marine Corps, I was hired by H.J. Heinz to be a project manager. Um, they were going to install a series of food processing plants in the former Soviet Union. And one of the places was Piatigorsk. They were going to put
Oh,
a
yeah.
baby food plant there. And they were recruiting me to be the project manager for this. And I mean, I was going to do it, but I have to say I was very nervous because budget realities came in and they told me that. I had a long conversation with Smithers, Mr. Smithers. Um, and we were talking about, you
Skinny
know,
guy, long nose, hunched over.
hey,
A
he fit
nuclear
the
power
bill, man,
plant.
with a British accent.
Oh,
But
jeez.
no, nice, very nice guy. But he told me that, budgets matter.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You have to operate within the budget, and decisions will have to be made where the bottom line, takes priority over everything else. And it requires a transition of thinking, which is okay because you're civilians.
Right.
You're not going to be asking the workers in Piatigorsk to get online and cross the line of departure to close with and destroy the enemy through firepower and maneuver. So it's a whole different mindset. I don't know if I would have been able to successfully make that transition. Um, Unfortunately, Boris Yeltsin climbed up on a tank in August of 1991 in Red Square or outside the parliament, and that ended H.J. Heinz' interest in investing in the former Soviet
Oh,
Union.
wow.
Job away.
Seriously.
But you know, so I respect the fact that there's a business world out there, and I respect the fact that there are realities attached to that. Um, and I may not be compatible with that, but we come back to your original point. General Hodges, um, he's not supposed to be a manager or the bottom line. He's supposed to be a leader of men. And you know this, one of the key aspects of leadership is technical proficiency. You have to know your job. Um, and the ignorance that he manifests about
Yes.
war today, modern warfare, etc. You have to ask yourself, is this deliberate? Meaning, has he,
Hmm.
purposefully dumbed himself down to make himself attractive to, mainstream media networks where that proliferate his visage and his words? Um, or was he always this bad?
I'm beginning to lean that not he and that whole cadre of generals were really always that bad because I mean either that or they have no self-respect to spew the crap that they're spewing. I mean just the stupidity. Um,
I watched the whole. I mean, during the second invasion of Iraq, I guess we'll call it, or the invasion occupation of
mhm.
Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom. It used to be called Operation Iraqi Liberation, but
Yeah.
it spelled oil, and nobody wanted to be honest about what it was really about, so it became OIF. But I watched all these generals debase themselves in literally lying about the justification for the war. Um, weapons of mass destruction and things of that nature. And once you start lying, you lie about everything.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
why we got into
Absolutely.
the situation that we're in because the general officers, um, especially when we got into the occupation phase, you needed to complete your tour of duty and get that tour package.
Yep.
Depending on your grade, you needed that Bronze Star medal if you were company grade or even field grade. Silver Stars they didn't hand out unless there was actual heroism, but Legion of Merits, man, you got those Legion of Merits out there. You have to hand that out to your guys. And you in order to get that, you needed to make everybody happy, and so they just started lying about everything.
Scott, I served with a major who's a MI guy. He went to Afghanistan for 2 weeks. They sent him on a little mission, and he put himself in for a Bronze Star. He put himself in for a
Yeah,
Bronze Star. Like, are you friggin' kidding me? I think it went through too. I don't remember if he got it or not, but just the balls to put yourself in, and he spent 2 weeks there. And but yeah, they felt it was normal. He needed to be a
uh,
lieutenant colonel.
yeah, people don't understand that. When I was in Votkinsk, we had the missile crisis. I mean, it was a big deal. It was Russians were putting missiles out of the factory. We needed to do cargo scan, and there were three company grade officers who stood out during this process. Stu O'Neill, a fantastic Air Force captain, former Army Special Forces, distinguished service in that,
Mhm.
but then he got injured, and so he transitioned in the Air Force. John Sartorius, one of the smartest men I ever met in my life, knew the treaty inside and out. And some idiot named Ritter, who was a Marine, who just was there breathing air. But we're talking about a treaty, where we have ambassadors and you have secretaries of state and everybody, I mean, getting involved. But the problem was solved by three company grade officers who help manage this crisis and bring it to a successful conclusion. And I was the senior of the three, and I rotated back to the United States early, earlier than the other two. And so my colonel called me in. I debriefed him, and then he called in an Air Force lieutenant colonel. He said, "We're going to do impact awards for these three captains. I want them written up for the Joint Commendation medals, um, and we're gonna get these out quickly. This is amazing work that they did that needs to be recognized." And so we left, and the colonel turned to me, he goes, write them up. And I said, I'll write up John Sartorius, and I'll
Mhm.
write up Stu O'Neill. So I ain't write myself up.
Right.
That's just not how it works. You're going to have to write that one up. He didn't. I wrote up the two. And I'm not bitter about it, but that's just the whole thing.
Yeah,
Because you don't write yourself up for an award. It just
exactly.
doesn't, it can't happen. And yet that's how the system works. Self I bet you they probably even write their own fitness reports.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. I was lucky enough. I had two accommodation medals, and I had two colonels that wrote me up on that, and they did a good job. They didn't have to. I mean, obviously, I wasn't asking for anything. I was just, but they deemed the word good. But yeah, but then you start looking at some of these new guys, well, newer guys, and yeah, they write themselves up.
Well, they're end of tour packages. I mean,
Yeah.
I hate that. In the Marine Corps, you used to be able to go through and spend an entire career um, and not get any personal awards,
Hmm.
because they were by exception. And if you're doing your job, you reward your job with a good fitness report, with a
Right. Right.
promotion, things of that nature. And so, you could actually see a gunnery sergeant whose senior medal was a good conduct medal,
Yeah.
and yet was feared and respected and that's the way it was. Marines just they don't get medals, or at least they didn't. Um,
Army used to be much more. There were Scrooges with medals to a degree, but when
Till
I was
Grenada.
serving, yeah, then they started giving them out more and more.
Grenada, everybody got a Bronze Star.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you look at some of these generals now. It feels like it's a banana republic. You know, they've got there's no room left on their chest. It's just ribbon and ribbon, 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 rows and rows. Like, and that one's for the paperclip fight, and that one's for for getting all my papers stacked correctly. It's ludicrous. They just keep making new ribbons.
No, and again, an end of tour award. I hate that term. End of tour award. End of tour is where you get your fitness report written, and
Yeah.
and that's what it's all about. If you get a good fitness report, then you get promoted, and that's your end of tour. But now it's like, I mean, one of the more embarrassing things was at the basic school, and the captain's course. They had an award ceremony because all these captains come in from different parts, and so we had a bunch of captains up there getting their awards. And we had one guy who
We're back. Yeah. So, how did the seven figure sum come around? What was it? Just the advice that you were calling for that they charged that much for?
General Motors put together a tiger team of people to address the questions that I was asking, um, about redesigning a cab and getting, this is back when, to give you an example, the U.S. Army had used a Q-36 radar
Hmm.
uh, in Beirut to track um, mortars being fired by the various militias. And they were able to get that radar um, linked with Marine artillery and also with naval gunfire to fire counter battery. Um, but that was a one of kind of thing. It didn't exist. So I was attempting to replicate this. I had
Hmm.
Q-36 radars, and I wanted that data to be fed straight into um, the battalion or the battery, the BCS system. We had drone feeds, which operates, again, they were developed, they weren't designed to be compatible with anything but themselves. Um, and so, in order to get the BCS system, the Q-36 radar, and the drones um, all working together um, into a centralized communication system that I was basically building from scratch. We had to design this whole electric bus thing that the Humvee wasn't designed for. Um, and so they put together a Tiger team, and I guess we got charged for that. And then the same thing when I was trying to make things communicate with each other, systems function. Um, McTissa had to design I guess I'll call it a chip, but to
Hmm.
design a box that you've plugged into one thing, you plugged in the other, and now they can communicate with each other.
Right.
Um, And I went and had the meeting and told them what I needed, and they sort of explained what have to be done. And I nodded my head dumbly and said, "Yes, of course, this is what has to be done." And I signed papers. Um, the thing that saved me is that never once did I said that I pretended I was a project manager or anything like that. I never claimed to be a project. I just said, they said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the intelligence officer from 5th Battalion, 11th Marines." And they went, "All right, that's good enough for us."
They heard the
Um,
word intelligence. That's it. That's
so that, yeah, I got the ass reaming of all ass reamings. But hey, it made it
Oh.
work. And I will say this, that was in 1980, 87,
So in today's dollars, it'd be like 50 million.
86. So it was the summer of 86 that I did this. And 4 years later, that system was used in combat, to adjust fire off the battleship Missouri and to
Oh.
adjust fire, um, with Marines from 5th Battalion, 11th Marines. So, you know, I'm pretty proud of that fact that the system that I almost went to jail helping create, you know, once they got professionals involved and the people who actually knew what the hell they were doing and not some dumb lieutenant, just, I mean, it worked, but once the Marine Corps turned it into a system, it performed well in combat. So that's pretty cool.
So the question is, whose general's name got attached to that system? It
I
definitely
can
wasn't
tell
going to
you,
be a lieutenant's name.
I can tell you whose lieutenant. I can tell you which lieutenant's name wasn't attached. But
Um, I the opportunities. I had a chance, and people didn't believe me. As a first lieutenant, I set up the only joint fire live ammo exercise between U.S., Russian, and British forces down in Glomach, Bosnia. And I was just sent there to support the Russian troops. I was up. They just pulled me back into brigade headquarters from being an XO to move everybody back. And my colonel's like, "Hey, come on down. You need to support these guys because you speak Russian for the next 3 days." And I arrived down there. There's a whole brief about this joint fire exercise to intimidate the Croatian leadership, but we can't say that, so we're going to bring CNN and everybody else in. Um, and and then the British are like, oh, because they had the base down the road, and I commandeered a truck to drive down there to use their satellite radio because I couldn't talk to anybody to coordinate everything. And they're like, oh yeah, we want to join in too. And I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. We'll pull you back in. And I'm a senior lieutenant, just doing all this, and people can't believe it. But sometimes you get those kinds of opportunities that are just, you know, they're not your standard career ladder.
well, and that's what leadership is about. You step in. Leadership avoids a vacuum, and
Yeah, oh yeah.
instead of being the person saying, "Well, I don't know, did we get permission for a multinational drill? Is the appropriate paperwork filed with the appropriate headquarters at the appropriate, or yeah, come on down, let's make this happen."
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that's what makes the job fun, is that
Yeah.
you can do things like that, as opposed to just being a bureaucrat. But
No,
go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
I was just going to say, I can't, I had the perfect shortened career in the Marine Corps. You know, I wouldn't have changed anything. Everything that happened to me while I was a Marine made me a better person, and I will never regret any moment spent wearing the uniform of a United States Marine officer.
My last position, I was an instructor at the Green to Gold Academy down in Fort Bragg. Um, and those guys that we taught are now the colonels or lieutenant colonels anyway, since 20 years ago. Um, Majors, lieutenant colonels. No, Army, you'd have to be a lieutenant colonel by that point, or your career is pretty much dead. But we got the worst of the worst, and we couldn't fire any of them because our colonel was, it's numbers, numbers, numbers. That's all he cared about. And when I ran these guys doing infantry lanes, I mean, I don't know how else you do infantry tactical combat, but you run. And we had three guys quit because I guess I overdid it with them. Like Christ, they're going to be lieutenants in a year. And man, me and my battle buddy, we got our heads chewed off by our colonel as captains. Geez, but you see what you got now.
Yeah, no, and the moment you start playing with standards, I look, I'm again realistic and does everything have to be a Delta Force selection program? No. Um, but the standards should be um, the standards necessary not to get the job done, but to excel.
Yep.
I don't believe in the standard should never be mediocrity,
Right.
because
Right.
the standard should be excellent. And the performance should be based upon the performance required to perform in an excellent manner at whatever task you're given. And that used to be the way it was done. For you to graduate at the top of your class meant that you mastered, the material that was being sent to you physically, mentally, um,
Hmm.
morally. Um, but today, it just seems to me that they've lowered the standards so that you know the middle can graduate with
Hmm.
without we used to graduate people at the bottom of the class, but
Yeah.
you were rated. I mean, your fitness report said you were at the bottom of your class, and that
Absolutely.
would
Absolutely.
come back to haunt you down the road. But now it's just a matter of I think they've just dumbed it down to get numbers through
Hmm.
and to create the impression of excellence. And unfortunately, combat is a harsh judge, and
Yeah.
you have people that can't perform to the highest standards in peacetime. What's going to happen to them when they're confronted with the harsh reality of war, especially modern war today? I mean, I don't know how long I could survive on the battlefield that's taking place. Um,
Yeah.
it's a challenge that would stress me even at my best.
You know, and I've been watching because we're on the brink of the U.S. invading Venezuela, which I think is gonna turn into Vietnam 2.0. And I'm looking at the way the NATO training is going because they've got the different exercises right on Russia's border everywhere, and they film it and they put it out. Christ, it's like the last 4 years of drone warfare never happened. Have you watched these videos?
Yeah, I mean, you 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 train to the standard. And unfortunately, NATO's standard for the past 2 decades has been a peacetime, logistically driven standard where everything is, what was there used to be, when I was in the Marines, we'd transition from one phase to the next in a major exercise with an admin move. So
Yeah.
you launch the company assault on position, da 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 da, and now we're going to make an admin move so we can transition to the regimental phase. Well, wait, we missed that whole middle part.
Yeah.
Or the passage of lines, one of the most difficult things to pull off
Oh yeah.
at the time, especially in combat. Instead of actually doing a passage line, we'll have an admin move and everybody will just reposition. Well, what about,
Yeah.
getting so you cheat yourself because
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
combat there's no admin move. And unfortunately, NATO training has for the last 20 years been one admin move after another admin move after another admin move. And it shows they're just not ready. Um, for the complexities of the modern battlefield. And this goes well beyond just adapting to drone warfare. We're talking about the logistical sustainability of troops in contact. They don't do any of the hard logistics anymore, and that'll be the end of any military. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
God forbid NATO tries to surge 50 to 100,000 troops into West Ukraine, to do something. They'll defeat themselves logistically before they even begin to initiate contact because they just haven't trained for this sort of operation. And then you start doing deep interdiction strikes by the Russians, blowing things up. Um, it's just we're not there. It doesn't mean that we can't get there. I'd like to believe that, I can't speak for NATO militaries, but the U.S. military is adaptive, and you know, once the lesson has been learned. I mean, just take a look at Kasserine Pass and what happened to the Americans in North Africa, and we learned from that. And next thing you know, we're one of the finest combined arms militaries fighting in the Second World War because we learned from our mistakes. We adapted. Of course, back then you could actually fire generals and not in their careers. If you remember General Allen,
Yeah.
the Big Red One, Terry Allen got fired. They just said that he was, worn out. He took the war too personally. They fired him, sent him back, and he ended up commanding another division that fought with great distinction in the European theater, after D-Day. Um, but today, it's a zero defect mentality. Person
Hmm.
makes a mistake, they're fired, career's over. So nobody makes mistakes. Therefore, nobody stresses the system and nobody learns anything. And NATO just simply can't isn't going to do the task. What happens in Venezuela? I don't know. This is more towards the forte of the U.S. military. The U.S. military has not been training to fight a large scale ground combat, high intensity combat in Europe. We are geared towards low intensity conflict. We have a whole bunch of CIA paramilitaries out there that are fully capable of doing you know very dangerous things in Venezuela. And yeah, I think that we will get Maduro, and I think that we will remove him from power, and then we're going to be, caught in a quagmire, and it will spread. I don't know if you saw what was happening in Brazil today with the drug
No,
gang
no.
street fights right now in Rio de Janeiro. The city
Oh,
is pretty much
yeah.
fallen. Um, this is the future of South America if the United States continues down this path, because we're playing to the strengths of the cartels. We're going to get involved with a low intensity conflict with the cartels. Um, and so we're dooming ourselves for 2, 3 decades of just chaos and turmoil. It's just stupidity when the solution is just to learn to live in peace and harmony with the governments that exist.
Yeah, there was a guy on CNN. I don't know his name, but I think, he's from the administration. And he's like, Maduro's a really bad guy. Um, and they've got all the resources we need for the 21st century. He's a bad guy because he's working with our opponents, Russia, China, India, whomever happens to be the opponent, I guess, that day. So much for narcotics. There's not a word about that. It's all about resources.
Was it
That's
James Story? Jim Story?
maybe. I need to look up who he was. Maybe I think I've got it on the phone.
Yeah,
Um,
he was the deputy at the U.S. Embassy in Caracas when it shut
mhm.
down, and he became chief of mission to the Venezuela interest section or whatever they wanted to call it when it transitioned over to Colombia. But he basically said that this is about oil and resources, not about narcotics.
Yeah, it was on 60 Minutes. Uh, yeah, I don't have
I think it was Jim Story. Yeah.
it may be him. Yeah, I didn't show his name. The clip it cut off right after a second after they had the name on there, so you can't really tell the name. But that's the flash. But yeah, it's just about resources. There's so much. So, but if it's about resources, what are they doing blowing up boats left and right of only God knows whom?
That's again, it's criminal, first of all. You and I know that first of all, we're not at war, but even if we
Right,
were at war, um, if you're not being taken under effective fire or, the enemy, you 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 don't just blow them out of the water. There's things that have to happen. You have to identify whether or not they're civilians or military. And if they're civilians, they have to be given the opportunity to, be detained. But we're just
right,
murdering people. And so that's problematic, but I think it's done more for domestic consumption, basically to prepare the American people for the inevitability of war. You create a de facto sense of confrontation, and it's also done to test the waters with Congress. And my God, we're getting ready to invade Venezuela, and there's no congressional activity
yep,
whatsoever. It's if Congress has totally abrogated its responsibilities to a president who is more dictator than a democratically elected chief executive who basically has made it clear that the Constitution just doesn't apply, that he can do anything he wants. Um, this is not the direction we should be going to as a nation. And then the ultimate irony is, let's just assume for a second that Russia illegally invaded Ukraine in total disregard for international law, just a straight up power grab, resource grab, etc. Well, hell, isn't that what we're getting ready to do in Venezuela? I mean,
Well, U.S. Army's still in Syria, by the way. How many
isn't
years
that
has it
what we
been in
did in
Syria?
that? Isn't that what we did in Iraq? I mean,
Yeah.
at least the Russians went through the motions of crafting a cognizable case under Article 51 of collective preemptive self defense. You know, and then of course there's the history of the Maidan. There's the history of the anti-terrorist operation conducted by the Ukrainian nationals. I mean, so there is no comparing the
Right,
situation
right.
that Russia faces. But my point is, on the one hand, if we're going to accuse Russia of all this stuff, then shouldn't we at least be on the moral high ground? But we're just going to turn around and Monroe Doctrine this thing. Apparently, anything's excusable under the Monroe Doctrine. We control the Western Hemisphere. Well, didn't we just spend a lot of time saying that Russia doesn't have a right to have national security interests and concerns about what happens on its borders, that Russia should just be silent as NATO expands into Ukraine and turns Ukraine into this fist pointed at the Russian heart? No, Russia doesn't have any right to be concerned at all. But the
Yep.
Monroe Doctrine gives us a right to invade a nation without any justification. We can just make it up. Drug runners. And James Story made it clear in his interview with 60 Minutes that this isn't about narcotics. This isn't about drug running. This is about oil.
And oh, let's not forget emeralds, gold. But only 20% of that oil is on the coast. And I got corrected on this because I thought most of it was on the coast. But I got corrected, and I stand corrected. Admit when I'm wrong. Try to admit when I'm wrong. But apparently, 80% of the oil rigs or the pumping stations are inland, and some of them very, very deeply inland. So they would require garrisons because, a drone can fly 30 kilometers and smack into something pretty hard.
Yeah, if you think that we're gonna that the one thing I've learned, I've been peripherally involved in the issue of energy security for a couple decades now. Um, And the one thing I've learned in attending various conferences and listening to people who are, specialists in this industry is that for the oil industry to work, you need stability.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. I remember I was called in by ConocoPhillips back right after the U.S. went into Iraq, and I went down to their headquarters, um, and they had this ranch facility and they brought everyone together and they were war gaming different things. And they had just put together a division, a ConocoPhillips division that was going to, pair up with, I don't know, another oil company to manage, the Iraqi oil problem. And I was called upon to provide an assessment. I said, well, look, there's just one question you have to ask yourselves. I said, are you a major oil company with a very small security division going into Iraq? If that's the case, then the question is, um, how many deaths are you willing to accept to get your job done? Because you're going to lose a lot of people. Or are you a security company with a very small oil management thing? And then the question is, what's your profit margin? Because you're going to be
Right.
spending a lot of money on security. But I said, these are your choices. And and those are choices that normally you don't want to make as an oil company.
Oh, yeah,
You want
absolutely.
stability and exploration, the extraction, the whole thing. You don't want to be worried about people blowing up pipelines, kidnapping your executives, murdering people,
Yeah, yeah.
fighting breaking out. And yet, if we're doing this about Venezuelan oil, I can pretty much guarantee we're not going to get that much Venezuelan oil out of the ground because um, there are enough people in Venezuela who will resist us for years. Who will go to the jungles. We will. We haven't learned it. We haven't learned anything about occupying a nation that doesn't want us there.
That's a
And
big nation. I mean, that's the size of France and Germany combined. with this insane open borders with Brazil, Colombia. I mean, and anybody wants to come in and take a pot shot at Americans, they've got a chip on their shoulder. And there's a lot of Latinos with a chip on
It's
their
a it's a
shoulders.
it's a double-edged sword because that's how
Yeah,
the CIA, of course, is getting their paramilitary forces in
yeah,
uh, through the porous borders. But gosh, that's how
yeah.
that's how the rebels are going to be resupplied as well. So, it's not a good picture for the United States.
Doesn't that worry them that the U.S. proxy war in Russia can just get turned around real quick, and a Russian, Chinese, Iranian, maybe even Brazilian proxy war in the U.S.? Do they even consider these things?
No, arrogance is its own, you know, creates its own form of stupidity. And right now we are literally uh, an administration that's, believing our own, it's believing its own propaganda. Um,
That's scary.
yeah.
That's always scary. But the other thing I don't understand, I've been out of the U.S. for 15 years, so maybe things changed. But inside U.S. cities, now I'm for tough law enforcement. I'm not one of the things I don't like about Russia is we have a moratorium on the death penalty. And it's been that way for 30 years because some people just need a good killing. You get these child molesters or criminals like that, you can't let them out. You never let them out, and they deserve, you know, a hanging. Well, okay, maybe I'm just radical that way, but hey, habeas corpus, did that just go away? How are they sending
Uh,
in federal troops into cities?
Not just habeas corpus, posse comitatus.
Right,
The
posse comitatus, yeah, 1878.
everything I have objected to the militarization of American police for some time now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't like it when our cops now feel compelled. I mean, here in the town of Bethlehem, when an officer comes out of his car, he's got body armor. He's wearing a tactical vest. He looks as if he's ready to launch an urban assault. Um,
Yeah,
that to me is just ineffective policing, because the mindset that exists in that officer is if you dress like combat, then you feel you are going into combat.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
in America is not an occupied country. I understand there's high crime districts, but gosh, the cops of the 60s didn't wear body armor. They were just cops. But then we also then transition away from blue to camouflage. And now we
Yeah,
have, our officers looking as if they are a Delta Force assault team, with their, flight suits, their Nomex, their this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, no, um, you don't take down a meth house with guys who look like they're ready to kill Osama bin Laden. Um, but we've militarized
yeah,
our military. And what happens is that becomes the norm. And so the American people become conditioned to seeing police as a military organization. So in many ways, we've already occupied American cities with the military because the police forces of many large cities look like they are military. And now we start folding in federal agencies, law enforcement agencies with masks. They don't have to identify themselves. The jackbooted thugs, and then we roll in with them National Guard that have been federalized, and now there's talk about taking actual federal troops and putting them in to occupy the city. And Trump just is
yeah,
just running straight over the Constitution. When you have federalized troops participating in the arrest and processing of American citizens on American soil, we are an occupied nation at that point in
yeah,
time. And that's what's happened to this country. We need to be very careful. But the people who said, this is what I voted for. I don't give a damn what you voted for. Um, what I care about is the Constitution.
yeah,
And you
yeah,
can't, unless you have an amendment process, your vote doesn't supersede the Constitution. The Constitution actually is designed to prevent stupidity like your vote, to ensure that, the populism, a wave of populism can't come in and undo everything that makes this constitutional republic what it is. But now we have a judiciary that's under attack from the executive. We have a legislative branch that's just asleep at the wheel. I mean, here we have the
For
president
decades.
openly talking
Yeah,
about invading Venezuela, and not one peep out of Congress
yeah,
about, hey, only Congress has a right to declare war. Not
yeah.
a single peep.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'll tell you, I've had more than a few friends, colleagues from the military that were in infantry, not only infantry, but primarily infantry, and they go join the police force. And no, you can't change their mentality. You know, I remember one of my buddies is like, "Hey, yeah, tomorrow I've got to go patrol my sector." Sector, dude, you're not in Iraq anymore. What the hell sector are you going to patrol? This is city streets. These are your citizens. No, no, this is my sector. We're going to go patrol the sector. Like, you're going to shoot somebody if they don't look right. You know, that's the reaction.
I actually right now they do huge veterans preferences
Hmm.
for law enforcement. If you're a veteran, um, you almost you will get the job. And I'm the other way around. I believe that if you were a veteran, especially a veteran who saw combat or in the combat arms, that this should be automatically disqualifying as a police officer,
Yeah,
and that it would have to be a by exception case where you were run through various boards and were talked to make sure that you had been um, that you didn't carry over,
yeah,
your
yeah.
experience because being a soldier and being a cop are two totally different things, completely,
Absolutely, absolutely.
especially a soldier who did participate in the occupation of a country. You do not want that mentality coming home in the streets. And so I actually believe that you should be disqualified from being considered for law enforcement if you have a military background. And again, you could apply for the exception, but then there should be a stringent board. And the other thing is there should be a red flag in your jacket, especially in the early years on supervision, meaning that you've got a veteran here. We need to supervise this guy to make sure he doesn't, go revert to form, so to speak, because we're not here to occupy the streets of American cities. We're here to patrol. We are literally here to serve and protect. The American people are not the enemy. And yet the militarization of our police force has turned the American
Yeah,
people into the enemy.
yeah.
Yeah, I've talked, we take, gosh, 18 weeks to train a cop. The Germans spend up to 6 months training their police not to
Wow.
shoot, on how to de-escalate. And the German cops go through a very strong firearms program, but then they're trained how to de-escalate. They're put in situation where people pull knives, where people are doing this, and how to end this crisis, this situation, without resorting to pulling a gun. Whereas the Americans are taught you enter hard and you shoot first, ask questions later.
Yep.
That's why there's so many cop involved shootings. Now we live in a violent society. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. Um, but if we need to spend more time training our cops, you can't train a good police officer in 18 weeks.
No.
A year and a half training program seems just about right. And a lot of that training has to be about de-escalation. And then there has to be constant supervision. About how a cop performs on the streets so that we don't get a situation where we're viewing the American public as the enemy and therefore it justifies the use of force or
Hmm.
violence or threats of violence against the American people. The law is the law. Enforce the law, yes, but don't occupy the American, homes.
Scott, I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you as far as having infantrymen or even or tankers or artillerymen coming into as police officers. But for the people that don't understand that, if you're a grunt and you're occupying, what's the first thing you're going to do when the civilians, of the occupied country that you're occupying, get in your face? I mean, what's the first instinct?
Well, you have to bring the situation under control. So you can tell them to back down. If they don't back down, you're going to draw on them, and if they don't comply, you shoot them.
Or put the butt of the rifle into their face?
Yeah. The
Either
bottom
way,
line
right?
is,
Violence, violence.
look, you got a vehicle approaching a checkpoint. Um, if it continues to approach at speed, you put a shot into the radiator, and if it continues to approach, you unload on the driver's side. That's just the way it is.
Yeah,
It turns
yeah.
out most of the time that it wasn't a car bomb; it was a family that was panicking during the early stages of the Iraq War. Marines would man checkpoints where the day before a car bomb had come up, but they were also dropping pamphlets or leaflets
Hmm.
telling people for safe passage. So near Nasiriyah, you had families rolling up on this roadblock with the leaflet in their hand, fleeing the pro-Saddam Fedayeen. And they're coming in, fleeing for their lives, approaching checkpoint, what they believe is safety, trying to show the leaflet to the Marine. And all the Marine knows is here comes a car barreling in on it. They open on it and they kill a family of five. Happened
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Um, we don't want that in the United States.
No, no, no. You don't want it anywhere, but yeah, especially in your own country.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this: you walk the streets of Russia, in Moscow. For everybody that's screaming, it's time. Well, it is a time of war, even if it's a special military operation. Did you feel like it was an occupied country? Did you see soldiers patrolling, cops everywhere, papers checks?
Well, I had to see when I landed, um, and I drove because the hotel I stayed at, the
Mm,
Metropole, good hotel.
great
Couldn't
hotel. Jeez.
couldn't afford it on my own, but thank you, Arthur.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, when I went by the Kremlin, there were OMON troops,
Right.
Rosguardia everywhere. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Hope I hope I'm not rolling into something here. And then you got to the Bolshoi, and it was also court. But that was by exception. I guess the president was going to be at the Bolshoi
Right.
Theater,
Right.
so they had to secure it and all that. But generally speaking, no, when I walk the streets of Moscow, first of all, I don't feel like I'm in a city under occupation. Um, you will see police on occasion, but they're not everywhere. Traffic cops are out there doing traffic cop things. I would imagine if you look long enough, you'll find a beat cop, strolling the street. But I'm sure there's places in Moscow I could hunt down where I shouldn't be walking at 2 in the morning. I just know every city has a place like that. Um, but I'd have to go looking for that place. I
I can
mean,
name one or two, and they're way in the suburbs.
yeah,
Just way.
and if I went that far to get into them, then I
Yeah.
probably deserved what I was getting.
Yeah.
But in American cities at a certain time at night, you just don't go out because you're
Yeah.
asking. And places that would be safe at 6 or 7 at night aren't safe at 9 at 10 at night, and they're definitely not safe anytime after that. Um, I never felt in danger um, in Moscow ever, not once. And I've been to other cities as well. I have to say I've never felt danger in St. Petersburg. I never felt danger in Ekaterinburg, Novosibirsk, Irkutsk, Grozny, definitely not. Um, the Volgograd.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Russia, again, it's not perfect. Does Russia have crime? Yes, they have crime. Look at their courts. They're full of criminals. And again, but I think in Russia you have to be looking for crime. Crime doesn't find you. You have to find the
Yeah.
crime.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, you can just be minding your own business and you can be overcome by a crime wave. Where my daughter lives in Washington, D.C., and her neighborhood is supposed to be one of the safer neighborhoods, but a couple times a month, there's a drug deal gone bad and guns come out and there's shots fired. And God forbid she's and her husband are walking down the road and they get caught up in this. And that happens in Washington,
Yeah.
D.C.
Yeah.
I heard it happened in Moscow in the 1990s. I heard that Moscow was, the Wild Wild West with various criminal gangs going on, and if you could get caught up in this kind of nonsense. But the Russia that I've seen since 2023 is a Russia where, again, I haven't seen evidence of any crime, to be honest. And I felt very safe the entire time that I was walking. I wasn't looking for crime. I went where I needed to go, but you know, you and I were walking around the
Yeah.
streets of Moscow at some ungodly hour of 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, I didn't feel threatened at all. I didn't, there were no people lurking in the shadows, giving me the one over, like, can we take this guy down? They're just people going to and from minding
Yeah.
their own business. And it just felt very safe.
We are almost out of time. We've got about 2 minutes, and I've got to say, as I'm listening to you, I keep w watching that shell behind you, that matrushka shell. Is that a real shell or is that a wooden case? Because that's really pretty looking. Oh, it is. Oh, nice, very nice.
This was a
Uh,
gift from a Russian, Mr. Klinsevich, whose nickname is the Chameleon. He was a
uh-huh.
Russian special operations soldier in Afghanistan. And this is actually a shell that they put together. Um, it's to raise awareness of veterans.
Hmm.
The veterans from Afghanistan weren't treated very well
Yeah, they weren't. They
by
horrible
Russia.
time for them. Horrible time.
So today, now with the veterans coming back from special military
Hmm.
operation, I think that there's a concerted effort being put out there to ensure that society recovers them, gives them the training, gives them the help they need, so that the horrors of war don't haunt them forever
Right.
and don't haunt society forever. So I think this is something they make as a way of helping raise money for to help the veterans of conflicts.
Very cool. Very, very, very cool. Looks really nice. Yeah, th those guys, by the way, there's whole programs to get them into government, veterans that are qualified, get them into universities if they need it, just hiring programs. And you're absolutely right, because the Afghan vets, they came in, it was just the collapse of Soviet Union. Nobody cared about them. Nobody cared about anything but surviving or getting stinking rich by robbing everything. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, Scott. Great pleasure as always. And there's so much happening constantly. There's always something to talk about. The news cycle's insane these days. Anybody has comments or questions, put it in the comments. I'll make sure Scott has the links so he can read them. It'll be out on YouTube pretty soon. So, Scott, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, and maybe we'll get another beer the next time I'm in Moscow.
Cookout, my place.
Okay.
Definitely.
Have a
Cheers.
good one.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.